Welcome to episode 2 of the Legacy Warrior Podcast Warriors. I'm Walt McKinley. I'm here with my partner in crime, Stephanie.
Hey, everybody.
And we are featuring real people, real stories, and real triumph. We're pumped to bring you episode 2. Here it is. Yes, we are back. We are still doing it. And we are on a mission to help you find the warrior within and elevate not only you as a person, but elevate your legacy and for generations to come using the exact tools we use to transform our own. So today, you guys, this is my favorite topic, which is probably going to come as a surprise to you when I tell you what we're going to talk about. But I want to ask you some questions. Do you ever feel angry? Do you feel shame? Do you feel alone? Like nobody really ever understands the pain that you went through? Like you're being judged? Like happiness is just out of reach? And happiness can happen for everybody except for you. Well, if you've answered yes to any of those questions, then you're in the right place today. Today, we're going to talk about healing from trauma, specifically about the 4 keys to living an extraordinary life and how to use your past as rocket fuel for your future. Things that I personally did, tools that Stephanie's personally used to overcome trauma or struggles in our life to help us get to where we want to be and really start to maximize our potential instead of living at a fraction of it. Go ahead, Steph.
Yeah, I just wanted to say this is the process that Walt really used to heal from intense trauma, but it's not only used in that situation. Like he said, we can all incorporate this in our everyday life, in our struggles that we have every day with our people close to us.
Yeah, I think, you bring up a good point. We think of trauma, people say trauma, and we think of the heaviest of the heavy stuff. And I'm going to talk about a little bit of that today. You guys know I wrote my memoir, Monsters in My House, A True Story. You don't get a title like that from a memoir unless you've been through some things. But this is about that. This is about everyday struggles. This is about whether or not you experience something in your life traumatic that was 5 minutes long or it was 15, almost 16 years long, like mine. And this is how do you use that trauma to feel empowered for yourself, but then also turn that pain into purpose in your message that you can use to help somebody else. And so there's so many aspects of this. But what I know, and I want you guys to picture this, you guys have all seen the Maslow's hierarchy of needs pyramid. And so at the bottom of this pyramid, you've got food, shelter, and water is your first human need. Well, food, shelter, and water, all that does is let you survive. Right, Steph?
Right.
That's it. Like you're just living day to day, second by second, just doing the bare minimum as a human being to survive. And by the way, as I healed from my trauma, there were moments I felt like all I did was survive. Mm-hmm. The next phase of self-actualization is creating a safe environment. It's the need as human beings to feel safe in every single thing that we do. And I feel like, Steph, I'm curious your thoughts on this. I feel like so many people, as soon as you say safe environment, what do they think of? They think of everything around them, but not of themselves. Like, what do you think about that?
I think everybody's different when it comes to that. There's different things that make us feel safe. And like you said, that can be internal and external. They're different.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right. For me, if you want to create a safe environment, I've seen so many people, and think of Robin Williams, think of Anthony Bourdain, Kate Spade, even recently Twitch. These people all have, from the outside lens looking in, had everything you would want in life.
Yeah.
I mean, look at Twitch, for instance. He was, to me, if you looked at the guy, he always had a huge smile on his face. He was like the personification of like this happy dude dancing around. He had a job on Ellen. Go ahead.
He had a beautiful family. Mm-hmm. He looked very happy. And yeah, no one would have known.
And unfortunately, the pain that was inside of him that he kept hidden from everybody else created this unsafe environment. It created this pit of despair that even though he looked fine on the outside, he wasn't on the inside. So you can create what you feel like is a safe external environment, But if you don't create a safe internal environment, and that's what we're going to talk about today, you're always going to limit your potential, and you're always going to feel like happiness is really just out of your reach. And the happiness that, if you're listening to this, I want you to know you deserve that happiness. You owe it to you for that happiness. You owe it to the people that love you the most, that are going to get that happy person, that version of you. You owe it to the world and the people who need your story, that kind of happiness. And we're going to talk about how I went from living in this pit of despair after my trauma, feeling like my childhood was stolen from me, to feeling empowered as a man that's going out and helping other people. Go ahead, Seth.
Yeah, I just wanted to say, and feeling alone sometimes, like when he was talking about Twitch, I was thinking of how, even if you have people around you, you would think they wouldn't feel alone. Like he had this beautiful family, he had a beautiful wife and beautiful children, and he had this great job. And so he had lots of great people around him, and you would think he wouldn't feel alone, but he must have been feeling alone internally that we didn't see. And that's the tough part, is we've got to start checking in more with our loved ones and really seeing how they're doing, because everyone can flash a smile and look okay on the outside. And most of the time when you ask them how they are, they just say fine. They don't feel like they can actually share how they really feel. And that's why it's so important that we start creating a safe space for people and quit with the judgment, because I think that's the biggest reason that people don't share is the judgment.
Yeah, and I think that's one thing. As we go through this story, we'll tell some stories to build the connection. But that's one thing that you did great for me. We met. You were 18 and I was 20, so I still had a lot of healing to do. When we met, I was only 4 years removed from testifying against my father in court for what he was charged with, felony child abuse.
Yes,
and so I had some perspective, so I was already looking fast forward to the future. But I still got triggered.
Oh, yeah.
I still reacted versus responded. Hell, I could still do it sometimes now. And so none of us are perfect as human beings. We need that. But I think also sometimes we need to just take ourselves personally out of the equation and respond in love to people that are hurting. Mm-hmm. We're going to talk about boundaries and expectations and some other things. It doesn't mean that you allow people to hurt you. You got to protect you. You got to create some boundaries there for your peace. But it does mean that you don't allow yourself being triggered in the moment to re-trigger somebody else, especially when that person is coming to you with something so intimate and so like that they've kept locked away and they feel shame from, and they're coming to you with some of these secrets that they've hung on to. You've got to create that environment where it's non-judgmental and you just listen and you hug on them and you love on them. It's not about asking deeper questions to them. It's about letting them share whatever piece of their truth that they're ready to share.
Yes. And I want to say it is a process. It doesn't happen. It happens in a different way for everybody. It can happen quick for some people. I think it can take a really long time for some people, but I can tell you that I did watch Walt go through this process, and it was definitely a process and a journey, and it didn't happen overnight. It took time, and little by little, each time you do some of these things, you gain a little more peace, you gain a little more freedom. And that's what it's like just getting started is the hardest part. I think once you start to release some of this stuff that you're hanging on to, and you get a little taste of that, just that little taste of a little more freedom, a little bit more peace, it makes you want to keep going. And, it's kind of like working out. When you start, the hardest part is getting started, because when it is the hardest, that's when you have the most work you have to do. But every time you see a little bit of progress, you'll be so motivated to keep going. And so we're hoping that, this will help you start your journey and really know that there's work ahead, but you can get there and it's absolutely worth it.
That's right. I mean, you have the choice at the end of this today, as we go through these 4 keys to living an extraordinary life. You have the choice whether or not you continue to live in the victim mindset that's crushing you, that's keeping you in comfortable misery sometimes, that keeps you running back to the thing that hurts you the most, or you have the choice to turn around, face the trauma that's been bogging your life down, knock it to the ground and start looking at the windshield of life and looking ahead of where you're going. Because for me, the difference when I did that, it was the difference between me feeling like I was stuck at a stoplight in life or riding on the HOV. And look, hey, look, I used to live in DC. We live in Phoenix now. Let me tell you, there is nothing that feels more amazing than being on the HOV lane, still doing 70, 80 miles an hour when people are doing like 5. Right?
Yeah, well, I can tell you when we lived in Washington, D.C., especially.
I'd probably tell you some road rage stories about that too. So I was still being triggered back then. So, but that's really the mindset you have to have, is to say, hey, I've been running from this trauma my whole life, but I still feel exhausted inside. I've been running from this trauma that doesn't get tired. I've been trying to hide from it by just pushing it around and throwing it in a closet and saying, I'm fine. I'm just going to be okay. I don't want to ever talk about it. But the thing is, the trauma will find you. You have to face this stuff. And I know, because I did it, if you want to really live a life full of joy and abundance, because the joy and abundance doesn't come from the things that you buy. I was an officer in the Navy. I was an executive in a Fortune 300 company. We had a lot of money. It wasn't until I started living in my purpose, doing what I'm doing now and speaking internationally and doing all these things, teaching people how to create an internal safe environment, that I unlocked even happiness I didn't even know I missed on. And so we're going to talk about that. So Steph, you ready to get into it? What do you got to say?
Yeah, I was just going to say, wouldn't you agree that you didn't find, or you realized that you didn't really find true peace or a feeling of freedom until you truly faced all of the things that you needed to face? Like, you can't deny it. You can't push it down. It doesn't, like you said, you can't run from it. It's always going to be there unless you actually face it head on, and you have to actually kind of go through this process, especially to get to forgiveness. And it's not going to go away no matter what you do. You can't mask it. You can't,
Right. Well, people try to mask it, right?
Right.
With drugs and alcohol and women and men and all these things that they think are going to provide them, or moving to different cities, or I'm recreating myself every 3 to 6 months. How about you just love the person that you're at and maximize your potential? But I see it as I talk to people everywhere in every profession. I have lived this stuff myself, trying to grab this happiness that nothing could provide for me. I mean, even getting married and having children, that couldn't give me the happiness that I really needed. And so let's talk about the first thing, the first key in the 4 keys today. Let's talk about the first thing that I learned in my journey. And this one's so beautiful because it's so hard.
This is huge
sometimes, but once you do it once, holy crap. It's almost becomes cathartic, because you start to see, as you let this pain go, you start to live differently. So the first thing that I teach is speaking your truth. I mean, you guys, look, some of you guys can see me on video. Some of you guys are listening, but I get so jacked up if I'm in my chair moving, wiping my head off. Speaking your truth to me is the difference between living your life feeling like you're underneath the water with an anchor attached to you and a long, heavy-duty chain, looking, and you can even almost reach your hand outside of this water. You know that people are living in that light. You know people are living and being able to be happy. You know people have success and they own their success and they don't lack the self-confidence and they don't have the imposter syndrome like you do when you have moments where you step outside of your comfort zone. You know that's there, but for you, you're just below this water line looking at the light, but drowning, like you can't breathe, like it's just an elephant sitting on your chest. And what I will tell you is, and the first person for me that gave me an opportunity to really speak my truth, and I'm going to tell a story about when I left my father's house and the power of that. But my Aunt Diana, who I lived with after that, at 16 years old, from 16 to about 18 and a half, until I graduated, She gave me opportunities and created space for me to speak whatever truth I was capable of speaking at the moment. Because I didn't just take the deepest, darkest secrets and I'm like, I'm making a decision to speak my truth. Bam, here's the whole thing, the whole enchilada, the whole kit and caboodle. I'm sharing every aspect of my life with you right now so I can get all this pain off of my chest. No, it came in small doses. It came in moments where what was bothering me was so bad. It was sitting just below my chest. And it was almost like I just had to let it out of my mouth. And so what I will tell you is, and Steph, I'll let you jump in here in a sec. What I will tell you is therapy and counseling will teach you to create a journal. That's phenomenal, you guys. It's a great way to start the journey. Create a journal, write those things down that your heart's been yearning to say. They will tell you to put on a piece of paper what's hurt you and throw it in a fire. They'll tell you to put it on a piece of paper and put it in a balloon and let it fly away and kind of give that to God and let it go to the universe. What I know for fact, because I lived this, was speaking your truth. It was the difference between living my life drowning and somebody taking bolt cutters and snapping that chain off. And think when you've been held under the water, wrestling with friends, or, anytime you can't breathe and you come up, and it's like taking this first gasping breath of air, full of hope, full of love, and full of life. And for the first time, you can stop surviving inside. And you can start hoping and wishing and thriving and thinking about your future and getting your power back that's always been there. You just had to take it. So Steph, go ahead. Cause I'm me, I'll jam on this for like 45 minutes by myself.
I love how passionate you get about it because you really did live it. And I can attest to seeing him, even because like he said, by the time, we started a relationship, he had already opened up some things, but even when he met me, there was still a lot locked inside, and little by little just certain things I think would make him think of something, and then he would share a piece of it. And I have to tell you too, I have a lot of close friends and family and that have opened up to me at times about really deep things that you don't just tell anyone. And I can tell you in all those moments, it's just like he said, I would just listen and let them share what they needed to share and just really just say, I'm here for you and I love you, and hug them. And that's really it. And because honestly, when they're ready, they'll share. And it's the same for you. If you're the one that needs to let those things out, you just need to find someone you really trust and, share a little bit. And then if you feel like that felt really good and you feel comfortable with that person, I'm sure they'll be willing to listen to more. But it's like he said, it's like a poison in your soul. If you don't let that out, it really will just grow worse. I think it does more. It doesn't stay just inside either. I mean, if you don't let that out by speaking it and getting it out of you really have to speak it out to the universe. Like he said, if you don't find a way to do that, then it leads to other things. You will start to become physically aggressive and all those other things that you don't want to do. And we've all seen it. We all know people that it's happened to. So
yeah, verbally abusive, physically abusive. There's so many different pieces of the puzzle. People walking around
becoming an alcoholic,
around you,
becoming a drug abuser. All of those things are signs of someone that has poison in their soul and they haven't learned how to release it because they're trying to mask it and they're trying to find some other way to run from it. But like we said earlier, you can't run from it. So this is a key piece in finding your peace, is speaking your truth.
Yeah, and I'll tell you guys a quick little story. It's outlined in my memoir pretty heavily, but when I was 15 and a half years old, I had a chance to tell the truth of what was happening to me in the abuse when I was 10. My sister had ran away from things my father was doing to her. It's her story. It's her story to tell, and we'll have her on the podcast here probably about a month or so. My sister was telling, she left to go live with my mother again. I was too terrified The police came to the school. I just couldn't say anything. I wanted to. My heart was screaming out to say that I was being abused and I was being beaten to the point of losing my sanity. And I thought my father could kill me, but I was so terrified that I just couldn't speak my truth. And here's what that did. That caused a lot of shame for me. And I know it does, whether you're 10 or whether you're 100. Your age doesn't matter. When you're keeping those secrets inside, it just adds shame on something that you're already struggling with. And I meet so many people who can't forgive themselves for the time that they couldn't show up and speak their truth the way that they did it, that they wanted to. But the reality is it takes some real courage to do that. So if you're out there and you're working on it, I want you to know it takes courage. But the reason we're sharing this story today is for those of you guys who haven't found that yet. I want you to know you're not alone. I couldn't find that at times in my life. But let me tell you where it turned. So I was 15 and a half. I see my dad walking up these steps to our one-bedroom apartment that we lived in. I've got 5 of my friends sitting with me, and he's drunk and he's swaying as he's walking up the stairs, and he knees me on my shoulder as he gets to the top of the steps and tells me I better not move off the steps. And I'm mortified, right? I'm 15 and a half. One of the girls I liked, sorry, Steph, one of the girls I liked, it was just, I was so embarrassed in that moment because all the other times it was always done behind closed doors, never in person. And that's why families say, like, what do a bunch of families say? What happens in this house?
Stays in this house.
Stays in this house. And that's a way for the abuser to keep themselves safe from persecution, right? From prosecution at times. And so, you know, a couple minutes go by, this girl grabs my aunt, she takes off running down the street. So I chase her because, of course, I like her, right? So she gets to the bottom. She's like, I bet you can't catch me. And I'm like, promise I can. I'm super fast. Watch this. And I don't even know. I might have floated off the steps because I was so excited in that moment. We get to the end of the street. My dad comes marching down the middle of the street, and he's drunk. He's on prescription painkillers, and he's screaming at the top of his lungs. In the street, there's literally people walking their babies in strollers. There's people walking their dogs. I'm with my friends in this moment. There's other kids out riding their bikes and whatnot. It's like a late afternoon day in the Arizona, heat. And he walks up to me and he hits me, punches me in my face, and it knocks my hat sideways. And it's so vivid, knocks my hat sideways. And I stuttered really bad back then. And I was like, Dad, I was just getting my hat. Anytime I got scared or nervous, I would stutter because of the abuse I had went through. He punches me in my face again and knocks my head off the ground. Well, in this moment, the most pivotal moment of my entire life to this day, I lean down and I go to pick my hat up and I look up at this man, and this man is looking at me with anger in his eyes, hatred in his eyes, but not for me, at himself, because he had never spoken the truth about the abuse that he went through. And I knew in the moment, so if you're listening to this, I want you to hear what I'm saying right now. I knew in the moment I deserved more. You deserve more. I knew in the moment I had, and I owed it to myself to get out of there. If you're going through trauma and you're going through abuse right now, you owe you to leave. You don't owe it to nobody else but to you, and you deserve to get out of there. And I ran. I ran as fast as I could, and people will tell me, I can't believe you ran from your father. I said, I didn't run from my dad. I actually ran into the rest of my life. It was literally the single most pivotal moment I've ever made. And the reason I'm telling you that story is because that night I had to tell the police what happened as he got arrested in front of me. There's a whole other dialogue to that I talk about in some of my speeches. And he's cussing and I hope your friends are worth it, boy, and boy this and boy that, as he's being arrested and put into a cop car. And this big tower of a man police officer leans down and he said, you don't deserve this, young man. Nobody deserves to go through what you're going through. So if you're going through some type of abusive situation right now, I want you to run into the rest of your life. There's organizations, there's people, there's trusted advisors in your life that are waiting for you to speak your truth so that you can begin to thrive and not just survive day to day. So I want you to really listen to my voice in this one. And here's what happened. 6 months later, I testified against my father in court. He actually represented himself, which was pretty ballsy. And mind you, this is 30 years ago. So the laws and stuff were a little different. He's abusing me on the witness stand. The judge finally stops the court case and said, I have heard enough. Mr. McKinley, if you treat your boy like this in my courtroom, I can only imagine what you treat him like at home. I have heard enough. And he looks at me and he has me go,
thank God for him.
Right. Protector, right? People are waiting to help protect you too. People are waiting to help protect you. And I was able to speak my truth in that courtroom. I looked at my dad and I was like, you're lying. You've been lying. You've been hitting me. I've been getting hit by everybody my whole entire life. And I never would have had the courage to do that before. So speaking your truth starts with one little thing. Speaking your truth will go to the second thing and the third thing and the fourth thing and the fifth thing. And so if you're listening to this and you haven't even done the first one, I want you to hear my voice and I want you to get the belief in your soul through what I've experienced that there is absolute happiness waiting for you on the other side of this and freedom that you're going to rob yourself of your whole life unless you have the courage to do it the first time. Because once you do it the first time, oh boy, it is so much easier to do every single time after that. And then my story started to unfold. I put myself in a situation living with my aunt at 16 where I could start to dream and thrive and hope and live and didn't survive day to day. And it allowed me to do the next steps that we're going to talk about.
That was really good. I just wanted to add that Walt is probably the bravest person I've ever seen about sharing what's happened to him.
We're even holding hands right now. Thank you, baby.
He, because like I said, every time you let out a little bit of this, you start to empower yourself. You start to realize, you start to take your power back instead of, that controlling you. Now you're going to take control of the narrative of your life when you start to unlock this. And like I said, I saw this in him. And every time he started to get a little more empowered and a little more empowered and a little more empowered to where he would just start sharing this kind of stuff. This was extreme abuse. He started sharing this stuff pretty openly with a lot of people he would meet. And you could just see the look on their face, like sometimes just wow. Like, I can't believe you can just talk about that the way he did. And, a lot of you who know him now, you see that. And a lot of you, I think, are still in shock at how he can just share that stuff unapologetically, because most people are you're so worried. We're so fearful of the judgment. And he's the only person I know that really got to a point where he's really like, he is not apologetic about it. He's like, I don't care. This is my story. If you don't like my story, then I probably don't want you in my life. And I agree with him in a lot of ways because, if someone can't accept you for who you are and the things that have happened to you, then you probably don't want them in your life. They don't deserve to be in your life because they should accept you for who you are. And none of us have the place to judge.
Well, here's the thing, Steph. That's a good point because I love that. And by the way, the people judging you are the ones who don't have the courage to face their trauma.
Exactly.
So you let them sit where they're miserable till they're sick and tired of being sick and tired. Mm-hmm. But if you're listening to this right now and you're like, I'm about to speak my truth right now after the end of this podcast, I'm going to call my trusted advisor friend, my best friend, someone I really trust, and I'm going to go speak that one thing that I've been waiting to speak. And somebody's going to judge you after that. You let them go ahead and judge. You let them go ahead and judge, and you set the example of what speaking your truth can do over your life and the happiness that comes with that. And guess what? They're going to come ask you, how are you so happy? What did you do? And you're going to say, you know what? I spoke my truth. You want to start speaking yours? There's a big difference. And so what happens after you speak your truth? The next key, the second key to living an extraordinary life comes in two parts, 1A, 1B. The first thing is acceptance. I see so many people Stephanie, you've seen this with people too. They diminish what happened to them. Well, you know what? My dad was trying to be better than me. Oh, well, it wasn't that bad. Or, well, my trauma wasn't as bad as yours. Don't compare. Don't compare and add shame to something that you're already struggling with. If you compare yourself to me or Steph, you just be like them two normal people who just made the choice to go after it and go get it. That's the only thing separating me from you. There is nothing else. If you're listening to this right now, there is nothing separating me from you other than a choice. And so you can make that choice right this second. And so the acceptance is really just saying it happened or it didn't. Period. Sometimes you just got to accept things for the way that they are so that you don't add to more tumultuousness inside of you. Go ahead, Steph.
So I know he's been talking about it from a trauma perspective, and, but we face things in our everyday life all the time. And so I just wanted to share a little story that just to drive home the point of just accepting something for what it is. So when I was 19 years old, I think, I got my first car. And it took me, I had to work 2 jobs to get this car and save up, I don't know, I think I saved like $3,500. And my dad told me he would match the other half. Now,
Steph's 44, so y'all did the math. $3,500 was a lot. That won't buy you nothing today, but back in the day, it could get you.
So I worked so hard to save that money, and I finally got a car. So I didn't have a car in high school. I got this after high school. And I had it 2 months. 2 months. Mm-hmm. And this is the point where Walt wanted me to come home and meet his family in Arizona. So we drove my car to Philadelphia, which is where I have a lot of family. And I left the car with them for the week that I was flying out to Arizona. Well, wouldn't you know, I get a call while we're visiting in Arizona. It's my uncle, and he tells me
New Year's Day.
Was it?
It was New Year's Day because we were sleeping in because we had a beverage or two. We were young, y'all. Give us a break.
So he tells me, and I can tell it's not good news. He says, "Stephanie, I'm so sorry, but your car has been stolen." And I said, "What?" And he's like, "Yeah, it was parked on a public street because it's Philadelphia. It's actually inner city Philly, and they didn't have a garage or a driveway for me to park in." And you could tell he felt terrible. But then we get home, and I'm just starting to stress out because I'm like, they told me insurance wouldn't cover it until it had been at least a month. And I had to get back and forth to work and school. And so I was getting really upset and worked up about it. And, Walt, the calming man that he is, so he's telling me, there's nothing you can do about it. Like, it happened, and now we need to just move forward and figure out a solution in the meantime until, they can tell you what they'll do with your car. And I had to really just accept that it's gone. There's nothing I can do about it. Crying about it, whining about it isn't going to do anything ultimately. And what happened is they ended up finding the car, and it was totaled. They said it was completely stripped for all the parts.
Even the airbags, they took them out.
And so the insurance company actually gave me the entire amount that I paid for my car. And so I got all my money back, and I actually went and I got a better car than I had initially. So I ended up having a better outcome than I would have ever thought. And why waste time getting so upset about something you can't do anything about? And this is something that Walt really taught me, because, like I said, I came from a loving home, and I was kind of in a bubble. And, when I ventured out at 18 and got out there, that's when all of these things started hitting me that I had never had to deal with. But he already had a lot of life experience. And so he had a much better attitude about it because he always knew he just had to figure out a way to find a solution.
Well, it's perspective, right? For me, it was, you're getting your car stolen sucks, but there's a solution for that. That was better than me getting thrown in the basement in the dark at 7 and 8 years old and locked in there for hours.
Right.
So for me, the perspective of my life gave me the ability, even in the most chaotic times, to see the bigger picture and the silver lining, and then find a solution and be very solution oriented instead of problem focused.
Right. So I always found that he it's funny because it was like the big things that happened that I felt like were okay to be upset about. He would always be so calm in those moments because he did have that perspective. He knew how bad life could really be. And so most of the time he'd be like, this is nothing. And so it was awesome for me because I was the total opposite. Like those kinds of things like just threw me for a loop. And I was, you know, whining and complaining about it. And he'd be like, just, there's nothing you can do about it, you know? And so that was just my piece of acceptance, like getting you to understand what it means by acceptance. Like sometimes we just have to accept things for how they are.
Well,
and we can't change that.
I love that because everybody thinks whether it's getting your car stolen or whether it's you got laid off from your job and you need to go find a new job, or whether it's, you know, you had to go through your savings to take care of some things that might have had some medical things that might have happened, or you're healing from your trauma. Life is about acceptance. Here's what would have happened if Stephanie would have stayed in that position of being pissed. Here's what would have happened if I didn't accept my trauma for what it was and that it was over and I couldn't change it. But how could I use it as fuel? Steph actually got a nice dope little Honda Civic out of that when she was driving a Sentra. And so she was like, what can we do if we get this car stolen? No. But, you know, for me, people that tend to stay stuck, they don't accept the things that happen for what they are. They tend to stay in that place. They don't ever grow as human beings. Sometimes almost emotionally, they really stay in that place. And ultimately, us being upset about Stephanie getting her car stolen, does that change what the thieves did? No. Does that make the thieves feel bad that stole it? No. Me getting upset about my trauma that happened, does that mean the people that, you know, had me experience that, those hurt people that hurt me, does that mean that they're going to feel the pain when I'm with my wife and I'm upset because I haven't accepted a certain piece of my trauma? No, they don't even know. That's the thing, guys.
Right.
So the acceptance is about you being able to move forward to the next piece of this one beat.
I was going to say, I like that you said that because I just want to drive that home that, you know, yeah, the person that hurt you, if that's the case, like how he was abused, the person that hurt him, you know, him staying stuck in that place and feeling upset and angry with that person doesn't do anything to that person. They don't even know. Like, so all you're doing is hurting yourself. And that's what ends up happening if we don't learn to accept what happened.
And you can't acknowledge. So this is the 1B, the 2B to the 2A, right? Second key is acceptance and acknowledgement of the emotion. So I'm a guy, so that was harder for me. That was, you know, and I'm in a couple dads groups and I go to men's group at church and whatnot. And I see so many men struggling and suffering because they're so busy trying to put this facade of strength on. You know, you hear all this alpha male, you know, work harder, nobody cares. I'm alpha male. Let me go lift some weights. Right. And I'm joking, right? Like some of those things are cathartic. I like to work out too. But it's okay not to be okay.
Well, I feel like men are always told, suck it up. Like when you're a little boy,
don't act like a girl.
They teach boys, suck it up. We don't cry about that. That's literally what they say. And you're not supposed to talk about your emotions. That makes you look weak. That's girly. Like,
and for me, like my mother and stepfather, they used to call me Wilma because I cried a lot and I was so fidgety and timid that I would flinch anytime an adult got near me from the abuse that I was under, that I had experienced since the day that I was born. They would call me Wilma. So there's a complex with that. They're even calling me a woman's name instead of calling me Walt. And so I see so many men.
And that was your own family.
Right. And it's like a badge of honor. Like I used to be like, I don't even cry. I cried like 2 times in my adult life. I'm so tough. What I have found, and this is where women, I feel like, have a real superpower, Steph. What I have found is the biggest flex of strength that somebody could show the world is the ability to be vulnerable.
I agree. Absolutely.
I have probably cried more in the last year and a half, a lot of happy tears too, than I have in my whole adult life. I mean, there was a time outside of one time when Steph and I got in an argument when we were real young and I was drinking and I started crying because my feelings was hurt, getting emotional. The only other time I really cried as an adult was when my kids were born.
I used to say that I had only seen Walt cry. I could count on one hand in the whole, like, And this is after many years that I would never see him cry. It was like he just could not let it out. And this is something that I also want to say is for the men out there, women feel, like he said, vulnerability is actually strength. We want you to share with us. We want to be your safe space. We want you to open up about those things. And we can't help you and we can't support you in the way that you need if you don't open up about what's going on with you. Because most of the time, if you're punching the wall or, you're letting out physically what's going on inside of you, that doesn't help us. It doesn't help you. It doesn't help anybody. So we need you to vocalize these things. We need you to open up about it. We want that from you. I just want to really stress that because, I hear a lot of men say they don't feel supported by their wife or their girlfriend or whatever. But that's partly because if you can't open up and be vulnerable with them, then they're going to close off also.
Yeah, you got to allow them to support you. But I also, and I love this dichotomy of like the feminine version of that and the masculine. I also want to talk to the ladies. So I've seen women tell their man to man up. I've seen women tell their men, I don't know why you're always complaining about your job. I've seen men tell women, like, why don't you just, like, aren't men supposed to be stronger? Aren't you supposed to be, ladies, you got to create a safe space for your man too. If you're coming at him with venom, even it might not be a physical thing, but it's still an emotional and verbal type of abuse. You got to create a safe space for your man to want to come to you. And thank God, Stephanie did that for me. What I see is a lot of people, there's two people who experience trauma. There's two people that get triggered. And then it's like rabid dogs. Sometimes they just go at it. Who can hurt who the worst? And so it's just, there's got to be, men, you got to be vulnerable. It's the ultimate flex of strength, fellas. I'm telling you, you want to unlock a version of you've never seen, figure that out. Be vulnerable. Start talking about things. Go get around other men doing that because the iron sharpens iron, brother. I'm telling you. Women, ladies, you got to create a safe space for your man. And when you guys start to support each other like that in your relationship, whether you're married or not, or just dating, or you've been together 30 years,
you will be unstoppable.
Unstoppable, man. The team level of what happens after that is
when you get that, what do we call it? When you're in the bad cycle, it's a crazy cycle.
Crazy cycle, yeah.
But when you get in the good cycle, it's like a love respect cycle. We all need those two things. We all need the love and respect. And it's when we don't get that we start, going into the crazy cycle and start blaming and all of that stuff that you don't.
So ladies, if your man comes to you, here's what I'm going to tell you to tell him. Hey, I'm so proud of you for trusting me with that. Thank you. Thank you. And then just love on him. Even if he's complaining about his day, you got to get it out. That's part of that speaking your truth. That was the first key. So I'm going to move to the next thing because I know we're at 43 minutes now and talk about forgiveness. I could probably go, literally, I've done 90-minute talks on my own in front of thousands of people doing this. So next thing is forgiveness. And let me tell
this is a big
baby
one.
Jesus, let me tell you, 8 pounds, 6 ounces, baby Jesus. This was hard for me. What I realized in this journey of healing that I was going through, that I will go through for the rest of my life, I realized that hurt people hurt people. And that's why generational cycles are transferred to other family members 78% of the time, because we sweep it under the rug. We don't talk about it. We don't do the first two things, much less forgive. And so we sit with this poison in our soul that just atrophies who we are every day as a human being. What I realized on my personal journey of forgiveness is those people who hurt me, who didn't have the courage to go face their own trauma, who self-medicated, who just lived a life of anger, who lashed out at others, who would neglect and disappear for years, they were still hurting regardless of how I felt. And every time I thought of one of them, I would get angry. I would feel shame. I would feel unloved. I would feel like I wasn't worthy of my own parents' love, that they didn't care about me.
When you get in that cycle of, why is this happening to me? And you start saying, why does it happen to me?
Yeah, like they don't love me. They don't, and so you start getting in that victim mindset. And I lived there for a long time too, guys. What I realized as I got married, especially when I had my first daughter. When I had my first daughter, I remember Steph had a really rough labor. And so we're sitting in there and my daughter's on her chest and we're all kind of sleeping. And I remember putting my hand over both of them and praying to God to not ever, ever put me in a position to recreate some of these generational cycles that had permeated my own family, to allow me to move with love and the softness that they were going to need, the providing, the protecting, the things as a man that I wanted to show up. And my want was there. Did I have the capacity to match my want to show up in the way that I needed to show up for them? But could I show up for myself first? And I realized the anger I held and the lack of forgiveness, and every time I thought about them and where I went mentally and emotionally, was hurting my wife and daughters, or could. I also realized that I owe it to myself to be happy. You owe it to yourself to be happy. You've heard me say it like 20 times on here. You owe it to yourself and those people you love the most to be the best version of you. And Steph, you talked about in my own journey that what you saw from me. And the last pieces of the puzzle for me were really the forgiveness piece. And I'll tell a quick little story. My stepfather, my little sister's father, he's the one who used to throw me into basements. And I mean, he beat us up pretty bad as kids. And when I saw him at 19, I was like this rage I had never felt in my life. I saw him 12 years later at my sister's wedding. And I had done a lot of forgiveness at that point, And I had really forgiven him. Let me tell you what I didn't do. I didn't run up and say, I forgave you. I forgive you. I didn't act like it was okay. I shook his hand and I told him, thank you. And that was it. Because forgiveness is never about them. It is always about you, even self-forgiveness for the times you didn't show up the way you thought you could. And guess what I got to do that night? And I say, God, I got to do it. You get to do this when you heal. I dance with my wife. I dance with my babies. I dance with my sisters. I dance with, my mother even. Like, we had a great time that night. And 12 years earlier, I would have sat there in anger, visceral hatred, if I didn't forgive, so that I could let go of that poison and replace that empty space in my soul with the love that I deserved, that I had earned, and the love that I wanted to give to my family. It will transform your life like nothing else will. And if you're spiritual, you give that pain, you let it go at the feet of God, and you let him do what he does with it, so that you can be the human being you were actually meant to be the day that you were born.
Yes. I'm just going to say again, you can't control what happened to you. It happened. And now the only way you can move on and truly find peace and happiness, like he's talking about, and that freedom, I think that's one of the biggest feelings from forgiveness is freedom, true freedom.
Yeah.
That is to find it within you to forgive the person. And it, like he said, it doesn't mean that you tell that person. They may never know, because it's not for them. It's for you. Because like I said, like they're never going to know what it's been doing to you either. So when you actually decide to forgive, find it within you to forgive, you're going to be the one that benefits from that too. So, I've had people in my life too that I've had to forgive, and I know the feeling also of what that really feels like. And it really is, because until you do forgive, it's like it haunts you. It's affecting you in your everyday.
Yeah. And
you don't show up as the same person you really are when you're holding on to the anger and the bitterness and the resentment and all that. So that I just want to say that, like, the power in forgiveness, and I feel like that's the piece that everyone struggles with the most. Like, beyond the speak your truth, I think once you get to if you can find it within you to speak your truth, and you can find it within you to forgive, I mean, you just don't even know how good you will feel.
Well, I like what you said, freedom.
Yes.
And by the way, what if you're sitting here and you're like, screw that. I'm not forgiving them, because that's what I would have said 20 years ago. I'm not forgiving them. Why would I let them off the hook?
Yeah.
And you're sitting here wondering why you're still so full of anger, even though the victimization that happened to you was decades ago for some people. What if you forgave? What if you believed what we're saying enough to forgive? And by forgiving, you found internal freedom that's been waiting for you the whole time. Because what you're doing right now, if you're listening to this and you feel that inner turmoil, isn't working for you.
I was also going to say a part of what helps you forgive, well, at least I know for Walt, he was mostly able to find that forgiveness because he realized that, he said earlier, hurt people. And so he realized that the people that hurt him were also hurt in some way, that they never learned how to forgive. And then they transferred that pain onto him. And I think a piece of that was like, just understanding that, it made it a little bit easier to find the forgiveness, because he realized they just didn't find it. They never worked through that pain. Mm-hmm. They didn't face their pain. They masked it, and they ran from it. And so he realized, they didn't have the capacity because they didn't put the work in to do it. And I think that was a piece of helping you forgive, because I know a lot of people, they'll be like, but how do you forgive? How do you do that?
Yeah, I think I had to do a lot of speaking my truth, accepting and acknowledging first. There was a lot of that happening before I was able to actually find some forgiveness. There was a lot of healing that was already catapulting me forward before I did.
And I like that you said, I know for me, the only way I found to forgive was because I'm spiritual and I have a lot of faith. I had to give it to God. That was my way. Mm-hmm. I had to lay it at his feet. I had to give it to him and say, I trust you, and I trust that you protect me, and I gave it to him. That's the way I found forgiveness. But I know not everybody will do it that way, but that's why I say, like, I don't know, you will have to find that within yourself.
That's right. And it's funny, you talk to people who've been able to forgive, and they'll tell you the transformation that happened in their life that's waiting for you right now. Mm-hmm. So you got to work those first two steps and be real about speaking your truth, accepting and acknowledging to get to that point of forgiveness. And when you do, I'm going to go to the fourth key now. The fourth key is exposing your superpowers. Look, I've had people get pissed at me for saying this, but I don't even care, because they're not healed. What I found during my healing journey, as each of these individual pieces that I was healing inside my soul, that was allowing me to show up as a better version of me every single day. Sometimes it was a fraction of a percent. Sometimes it was like 10% better. You expose these superpowers, these gifts you get from your trauma when you've done the healing, the empathy, the grit, the resilience, the compassion, the perspective, the integrity, the character, the hard work, all of these things that you get because of what you went through. I don't regret one experience in my life. Do I wish it wouldn't happen? Sure. But I can't change that. I've accepted the reality of what happened. As I did that and I worked through this and I forgave and I exposed these beautiful gifts, the ability to make someone feel seen, the ability to make you listening feel seen, even though you might not even be able to see me, the ability to create a safe space. You heard me last week say this is a judgment-free zone, but it's definitely not a growth-free zone. Stephanie and I, neither of us judge, because we have perspective of what it's like to be judged. We know we did a lot of healing in our own lives, and by doing that, we want other people to feel the same. So it's like working in this pit of despair in your life, and there's no sun, and there's no light, and there's no joy, and there's not shit in there except for pain and hurt. What I just gave you, I can't do the healing journey for you. What I can give you is give you those 4 tools. Put that ladder, a tool, that tool turns into a ladder, and put it down in there. And all you got to do is go up these 4 rungs to unlock the best version of you and a beautiful life that's waiting for you on the other side, and everything you ever wanted, but the feeling like it's happening for me, not to me. And I am who I am because of all of my experiences. It is absolutely magical and transformational. And what you will find, it's not only transformational for you. I've got people in my family doing healing now because of the example that I set. You will heal generations you never even will meet because you got the courage to heal yourself. More importantly, also on top of that, I shouldn't say more importantly, also, you're going to save somebody else's life because first you had the courage to save yours. Your test will be somebody's testimony. I promise you, people don't need to hear Stephanie's version. They don't need to hear Walt's version. They need to hear your version who's listening to this. This is about you. This is about you opening up your full potential instead of living out a fraction of it. Yes. And these 4 steps, what I didn't know when I wrote my memoir, the last paragraph, I put this in there, or the last chapter, they spell safe. Stephanie was like, babe, you know that spells safe? And that was, the first letters, right?
Yeah, I was going to say, he kept talking about this pit of despair and, that's how he felt in the beginning, was just this pit of despair. And, we're going through, he's trying to work through the process of how did I get out of that? Mm-hmm. How did I climb out of that pit? And then he's talking about these different things. And then as we were writing them down, I was like, wow, that spells safe. What? Mm-hmm. And it's really like someone just put a ladder down. Like he's giving you the ladder right now. That's what this is. He's giving you that ladder. But it's up to you to climb out. No one can do that for you. No one else is coming to save you except you. You have to do that. He can only give you the tools, and then it's up to you to use the tools to help yourself out.
Now we're standing up there cheering for you, right? Yeah. We made it to the top. We're standing cheering for you. I can reach my hand down and help pull you up, but I can't do the work for you. But your extraordinary life, the life you deserve, is waiting on the other side of this. We talked at the beginning. You want to have external freedom? You got to first work on internal safety and an internal safe environment. That's what we're doing. When you can have an internally safe environment and you could thrive and think about everything you want to do and where you're going and what you're doing, and you start to really move in that direction with the belief that you deserve it, that you can do it, that it's waiting for you because you feel amazing inside. What you can do outside will be greater than any hard work or discipline or anything else will ever give you. So create that safe inner soul that will have you living extraordinary.
And I don't know if you guys, so I learned Maslow's hierarchy of needs in Intro to Psychology in college. And he talked about there's the first 2 and the second one is safety. So when you feel that, when you take these tools and you create that inner safety and you feel safe, then you can start to move to those next levels, which you if you know the pyramid, you want to get to those top levels because that's where, the true
self-actualization sitting at, right? That's where the true best version of you is.
Yeah.
And by the way, I outline all this, shameless plug, I get it. In Monsters in My House, A True Story, you could read my story in the last chapter I dedicated to this right here, to how to create an internal safe environment where you can thrive both for yourself, for those people around you, and all the success and abundance that's coming your way. I did it because I know people believe they can do it once they hear my story. Once they believe it, I want them to know how to do it, which is why we're talking about it today, which is why I put it in my book. And so I cannot wait. Next week, we're about to talk about communication and relationships. Y'all better pray. Y'all better pray.
That's going to be a good one.
Y'all better pray. And Steph and I are going to get into some of the dirty laundry in our own relationships where we struggled in our marriage, where, we figured things out the hard way, where we grew together into the people who we are today, where we struggled together to be who we are today. And so make sure that you subscribe to this podcast. Make sure you subscribe to our YouTube channel where you can actually see her beautiful face. It's like Beauty and the Beast sometimes. I got my big old beard up in here right now. Where you can, but subscribe to our YouTube page, connect with us on Instagram. Both of them are Legacy Warrior Podcast. We'd love to hear what you think of these episodes. we'd also love to hear what you want us to talk about. So
yes, y'all, please go to the Facebook page and please write in the comments what you thought of this episode and what other things you'd like to hear from us. You know, Walt's the expert on this stuff, so he'd love to answer your questions if you have any.
Step into that warrior power. You're not a victim. You're not a survivor. You're a freaking warrior. So stand in that power, that fighter who you really are. Work those 4 T's. Live extraordinary. Live legendary. And until the next time, keep growing. Keep taking the next step forward. And
hey, leave this world a little bit better than you found it.
See you next week.